Listen, so we're at the midway point of the year, and I'm working on a best of so far video, alongside one for all the hidden gems that we've seen, but I figured I'd skip ahead and tell you all of the must-watch movies that are yet to come out that we got to catch at film festivals, from Sundance to South by, Slamdance, Chicago Critics, Tribeca. We've been to so many places that along the way, we lost our car, so I wanted to break down all of the top 10s in genre movies, documentaries, and dramas to hopefully get a future favorite on your watch list. Let me explain. So for the genre category, I wanted to start with all of the top horror and thrillers that we caught from all of the midnight festivals, including movies that had ambulances called on them. In my honorable mentions, I have Rebirth, which would have been that one at Sundance where a lady fainted for a movie that's about, get this, a doctor who impregnates herself, gives herself and then uses those cells to create an immortal serum. And that's not even the worst one. Late Night with the Devil was a decent one that follows a late night host in the 70s whose broadcast becomes haunted. Cat Person had some of the biggest buzz going into Sundance that stars Cousin Greg as an older dude who's flirting with a sophomore that stretches out the short story it's based on. And boy, is the cringe strong with this one. I know people didn't like it for various reasons, but I think it's bonkers in the best way possible. Like, you know, a movie's themes are really goofy. When I'm the one who's running this channel asking for tickets for the movie, but it's my editing partner Alina who gets the invite to the screening. We got series that were supposed to come out on AMC Plus, like Damascus, that follows a dude reliving the different ways that he could die before AMC just got rid of it. So one big reason to go to these festivals is that some of the stuff may never come out. But here are the top 10 that I'd pick. At number 10, there's the action, adventure, comedy, horror, sci-fi thriller called Divinity. It's about two brothers who get kidnapped by a guy who's seeking immortality before getting seduced by more women than Sucker Punch. It's produced by Steven Soderbergh and comes from Eddie Alcazar, who pitched his stuff as unconfined by genre and even mixes things like Metascope, where he's blending live action with stop motion, all while popping it in black and white. And I thought it was pretty interesting. So if you want to see Rico and Ruby fighting in real life 8-bit, add this to your list.
Divinity.
At number 9 is the horror documentary Satan Wants You. It follows the satanic panic of the 80s, specifically the memoir Michelle Remembers, that caused the nation to be scared of baby-stealing Satanists. It's an interesting look at psychiatry and memory, while also pushing the idea that the devil always speaks in rhyme, with them making up the score by mashing up classic horror themes, which I thought was pretty cool. Plus, they claim this is the first time people have heard these demonic recordings that were done in their sessions for the book, and now I think I'm haunted.
Let it come as much as you can.
I couldn't get away. I couldn't even down there.
At number 8 is an anthology series that's meant to make you question reality, titled Shatter. It comes from the director who did Coherence, which I would highly recommend if you want a nice brain twister of a movie. But here, it's split into different stories that are all meant to collide together. In the subconscious, is doing a lot. South by was also leaving these apples all around Texas, which have to do with the show, and it was kind of neat, but I do have to disclose that they gave us every episode but the first one.
Of what could become a limited series, or they could be put together and form an anthology movie, kind of like the Twilight Zone movie.
Number 7 is a twofer of native crime thrillers with Americana and Fancy Dance. Lily Gladstone stars in Fancy, which premiered at Sundance, where she's searching for her missing sister while technically kidnapping her niece, all while being hunted down by the police and the mob while they're on their way to a powwow. Americana comes from South by and sprinkles in some comedy in this Tarantino-esque story of different interlocking characters in South Dakota, all shooting it out to obtain this legendary Native American cloth.
Give it to me. No. Just give it to me. Fuck you. Shoot me.
And it has a very belligerent Simon Rex. An extra one for good measure here to make it 3 would be the other native-centric crime thriller drama, War Pony. And that one's co-directed by Riley Keough and has a lot of influences from American Honey, so if that's up your alley, I'd say add this one as well.
I'm really sorry.
Everything's gonna be different this time.
At number 6 is the tense Sundance feature Heroic. It follows a young guy joining the military out of necessity, only to go through physical and psychological training to make him the perfect soldier, and it's straight up Mexican Full Metal Jacket.
¿Cómo se siente cuando está enojado?
Pues, normal.
And number 5 is a podcast horror, all taking place in one room for the most part, titled Monolith. Pretty much, you have a journalist who's had to turn to podcasting in order to get back into the game, and she begins investigating an artifact that may deal with an alien conspiracy, and maybe also herself. It's one of those where you can just listen to it, since it's mixed so eerily, and it just proves that Lily Sullivan, especially after Evil Dead Rises, is a horror star to stay.
I want to know why you're here. And what you want from me. From us.
And number 4 is a hybrid movie from Tribeca that's like part doc and then becomes a bunch of other things called Cypher. A look at the artist Tierra Whack, who blew up off a viral YouTube video to then becoming a pop star, who pivots her documentary into a conspiracy theory thriller. Like, I don't know what more I can say since I think they're still listening. But there's an element to this hybrid movie where there's secret messages written throughout that has me excited for a rewatch so that I can decode them.
Now I use gestures in the lab like Dee Dee. Just ask Dexter. Party popping like Bubbaloo. I never back down because, nigga, I'm in front of you. One of a kind. I will never be a W.
Rounding my top 3 is a Sundance romance thriller that got picked up by Netflix titled Fair Play. It's the directorial debut of Chloe Dumont, who's the newest director for T Street, which is Rian Johnson's company, and I already know it's not going to be for everybody. It takes place at a hedge fund where a couple test their relationship when one of them gets the promotion over the other, and from there on out, it just becomes misery, but the performances, honestly, are phenomenal.
This event exposes true natures, and everything the couple thought they knew about each other gets called into question.
Number 2 is a dramatic thriller that is pushing its runtime, and yet I still wanted it to go longer. The Beasts, or Bestias, sees a couple move into a small village where everybody hates them because they're the only ones who refuse to sign when a company wants to buy out the land, causing things to get more tense than this poster.
Estas son cosas de vecinos.
Que te vieron con una cámara. Estabas grabando, ¿verdad? ¿Verdad que me estabas?
And topping off the list at number 1 is my favorite horror movie of the year so far, and one that I know is going to be making my end of the year list. Talk to Me. It's a bunch of teens that find an ancient hand that allows them to pretty much take hits at a party by getting possessed by it, and it is fantastic. It comes from the Rocka Rocka Boys, who used to make those crazy Ronald McDonald videos on YouTube, if you remember them.
I'm not a tourist! I don't have to show! Isn't that your sister? Is that Daisy McDonald? I was just tasting it! There's a McDonald's! Shut! There's a McDonald's just down the road! It just tastes better wrong, and it always has!
After being camera ops on The Babadook, they have truly elevated horror, because this is one of my favorites to come out of a festival since Hereditary. It's very rare that I shout out jump scares. I even like the sound effects, the camera moves, all the transitions, and there are several ways to read the movie and the allegories, because it's one of those that finally isn't afraid to tackle the present times, and it easily has one of the best endings of the year.
You know the drill.
Say, talk to me.
Talk to me.
Next up in genres are the comedies, which I had to separate into their own category because there's a bunch. Just for the honorable mentions, there's the sci-fi Pod Generation, which has Chiwetel Ejiofor and Emilia Clarke in a not-so-distant future where tech has evolved to give birth in pods. Now you can build your own baby. Fremont is the driest comedy of the year, where a fortune cookie employee sends out a secret message in one of the wrappings, leading to everyone's favorite chef. Late Bloomer stars Karen Gillan as a late 28-year-old loner named Louise, who ends up in an oddball relationship with an elderly Polish woman who she's caring for but can't understand a word. It's pretty funny, but surprisingly emotional. Then there's The Ordinaries, which is one of the most intriguing ones because it's a meta film where the world is a movie set, and you follow a supporting character trying to be a main one before getting digitized or even worse, becoming an outtake.
Oh mein Gott. Bist du asynchron?
Nein.
Ach, schon wieder.
Wenn die das im Institut erfahren.
Dann schneiden sie ihn raus.
Mama! Mama!
Rounding out the honorables would then be With Love and a Major Organ, which takes place in an alternate world where hearts are made out of objects, everyone deals in virtual insurance for lost photos and pose, and people live off apps that tell them how to live. One day, a lonely woman named Mona rips out her heart for a dude that she loves, only for him to run away with it. But what really stood out to me was the editing, because it's done by Tony Zhao of Every Frame of Painting, and the man was cooking. Starting off the 10, though, is the Lonely Island produced and directorial debut of Jake Johnson called Self-Reliance, a movie that he also wrote and stars in as a dude who's pretty much lost everything until he gets recruited to star in a death reality game show where he'll win $1 million if he can survive the hunters seeking him out. The bit is they can only attack him when he's alone. And well, nobody believes him.
The early genesis of it was, what if Jacob's Ladder had some laughs to it? Right?
At number 9, I have Sometimes I Think About Dying, about an office worker named Fran, played by Daisy Ridley, who sometimes thinks about dying, as she lives the most monotone lifestyle. It's based on a play that's also a short film that you can catch on YouTube right now, and I think it balances a good tone of being mundane, but also funny in the most awkward ways, and I think it's really going to hit for some people.
I work in an office and make spreadsheets. It's a new company, with a lot of people my own age. But that's about all we have in common. Unless someone else thinks about hanging from the tree outside the office window.
Next up is Bottoms, the movie I've been calling Not Another Teen Fight Club that has two high schoolers put together a group for girls to defend themselves when really they're looking to smash in other ways.
So, we teach a bunch of girls how to defend themselves. They are grateful to us. Adrenaline is flowing. Next thing you know, Isabel and Brittany are kissing us on the mouth.
It comes from Emma Seligman and Rachel Sennett, who made one of my favorites, Shiva Baby. And while it's not better than that one to me, because I really love that one, I already know that this one's going to be a bunch of people's favorite and maybe even end up as their number one. Plus, Marshawn Lynch has no business being as funny as he is in this movie, and 2023 just belongs to Io.
Welcome to our fucking fight club.
Let's get it poppin' in this motherfucker.
Number 7 is a misery comedy based on a graphic novel called Shortcomings. It's Randall Park's feature debut as a director, as he takes the graphic novel that comes from Adrian Tomine, who also did Paris 13th District, that got an adaptation that I thought was pretty decent. It follows Ben, the most cynical movie theater manager around, who questions his upbringing, his place in the world, but chooses to never see that he's the cause of all of his problems.
Depression, your weird self-hatred.
You could benefit from a little self-hatred.
Interesting.
It is rough around the edges, but somehow, this has been the one movie that we've been quoting the most, so I just had to have it a little higher on my list.
And you never felt discriminated against?
I definitely did, but not because I was Asian.
Because of your inherent bad personality.
Exactly.
Number 6 is a musical romance titled Flora and Son that comes from director John Carney, who I know has made a lot of people's favorites, and I think this one's pretty solid, and it got picked up by Apple TV+. We follow Flora, played by Bono's daughter, who decides one day to take guitar lessons online with Joseph Gordon-Levitt as her teacher, and it eventually becomes the way that she bonds with her son. It's cute, adorable, funny in its Irish ways, and I need 007 nominated for original song.
What's the biggest difference between Irish humor and American humor?
Oh my
Substance.
Oh, and that's Irish humor.
At the midway point is a religious dramedy called MAMACRUZ that pretty much is like a coming-of-age tale for an older person. It's about a strict Catholic grandmama who learns how to use the internet, and it just opens up her world. Now she's ready to be in a relationship with Jesus as she takes swallowing his body weekly extra seriously. The visuals are great, the lead is fantastic, and it does a great job at not tearing down religion, but also not being afraid to call out the aspects of it that are based on fear, shame, and guilt.
This adventure began when I found this picture. She is my mom, and I never thought that she was able to posing like this, and I realized that I knew her as my mother, but I didn't know her as a woman.
And number 4 is a movie we caught the South by premiere for, and that's Problemista. It's a new A24 flick that comes from Julio Torres, who created Los Spookies on HBO, he wrote for SNL, and he's coming in to handle everything for his feature. He plays an aspiring toy designer whose time is running out before they're gonna kick him out of the country. That is until he meets Tilda Swinton's character, who's the widow to an art dealer who's trying to flip his paintings.
Oh, El Salvador. Pupusas.
Yes.
And those nuns they killed in the 80s.
Right. So
it's narrated by Isabella Rossellini. RZA is really good, even though he's not in it for a lot. But it has this banking bit that is one of my favorite scenes of the year and still has me laughing. So for the A24 aficionado, this one's going to be right up your alley.
According to my calculations, that is not the amount I should have in my account.
What balance were you expecting?
0 would be great. just get me to 0.
And number 3 is a movie I know I can't recommend for everyone, but it's so over the top that when it gets to the emotions, it hit. Down Low is a dark comedy about a repressed man who's also depressed, who ends up finding a happy ending when he invites a masseuse over. And then things get bloody. It comes from director Ryder Doyle, who played Nick Nickleby in the series Barry, and stars Zachary Quinto in what I consider one of his best performances. And also Lucas Gage, who wrote the movie and has been calling it a gay Pretty Woman. I don't know the release date, but I hope, even though this was the one movie that had the most walkouts, that it doesn't get cut down, because they're able to get so dark in this movie that I thought the light at the end of the tunnel was beautiful. Absolutely outrageous, but beautiful. Oh, and Simon Rex is even more belligerent here.
Quick question, what's a straight play?
There are musicals and then there are straight plays.
So then what would be a gay play?
I guess a musical.
Oh, cool.
Number 2 is a comedy musical that actually came out with a whole live performance at the premiere.
We love you, independent films. Shout out to Acura.
Theater Camp follows a theater camp that's about to be shut down after the founder ends up in a coma, and it's pitched as an improvised story. It comes from Molly Gordon, Ben Platt, and all of their ensemble, with Will Ferrell as producer, and both the comedy side of it and the musical numbers absolutely deliver.
Your tears should come from within, not from some emotional grenade that you smuggled in.
Tear sticks are doping for actors. Do you want to be the Lance Armstrong of theater?
Wrapping up the top 10 for comedies is a little movie called Chronicles of a Wandering Saint. You know that Tia who's like extra religious but does it for the gossip just as much as she does it for the Lord? That's Rita. The fast description had it as a collection of small and magical moments inspired by everyday people, but I honestly think the less you know about it, the better, because I went in not even realizing it was a comedy, and I came out declaring it as one of the best opening titles of all time. A quick but big shout out to our channel sponsors. Thank you to all the YouTube members and patrons who support the channel monthly and get these lists early, along with a couple of videos, especially the channel members who get special badges to use on video comments, as well as emojis to use alongside our new monthly watch list live streams that we'll be doing at the top of each month. It really helps with all the breakdowns and coverage that we do, since, studios usually claim everything, and, well, we're truly independent when it comes to going to all of these film festivals. So a big thank you to all the LME listeners. Your love butters our popcorns and keeps these videos going. Now, back to the show. Now, I know that docs may not be the first thing people think of when going to a film festival, but they were kind of stacked this year. Even last year for the Oscars, most ended up coming out of Sundance and South by, so chances are we're looking at the next award winner on this rundown. But even more importantly, hopefully, one of your new favorites. There was a disturbance in the Force that breaks down the behind the scenes of the Star Wars holiday special and how it got made, coming from the editor of Napoleon Dynamite.
When 70s TV was bad, there was no description for it.
So funny and so stupid at the same time.
Some other honorables would be starring Jerry as himself, which is a documentary procedural that follows a retired grandpa who gets recruited by the Chinese police to become an undercover agent, and that only gets him into deeper trouble. There were movies about a cult in Japan who used anime to recruit new people, a shutdown video store where the director pulls a heist in order to get 55,000 rentals back, and a doc about the disappearance of Shere Hite, the author, whose letters are narrated by Dakota Johnson. So of course Amanda the Jedi rewatch possessor took over my being and rushed me over to the front row to hear her quickest quips. The Eternal Memory took home Best Stock at Sundance, which looks back at a couple's relationship from the past 25 years after the husband is diagnosed with Alzheimer's and the wife is trying to capture everything before he forgets her. It's produced by Pablo Larraín and his brother, and it comes from the director who did The Mole Agent, so you know it's going to make a lot of people cry. And the fact that it's a mix of the documentarian shots in the present, the wife's personal footage as it leads up to him losing his memory, but then goes all the way back to the old recordings the husband did for work, makes this a movie that's extra powerful when they mix all of their recordings together.
Yo soy Augusto. ¿Y tú qué eres?
Yo soy la Paula. Nos conocemos hace más de 20 años.
There was also a bunch of music docs like All Up in the Biz that comes from the best music profiler in my opinion right now, Sasha Jenkins, and it's breaking down Biz Marquis' life and career and how he was more than just a friend. Going Varsity and Mariachi follows high schoolers facing off just like Cheer, but for music. Hung Up on a Dream is produced by Tom Hanks and directed by Robert Schwartzman, doing a phenomenal job looking back at the band The Zombies and how they influenced so many other artists, but they didn't realize it until they were in their 70s.
It's a legacy left behind.
and it's a legacy that will go on.
But starting off my top 10, I have Citizen Sleuth, a true crime doc about true crime that follows a podcaster who did a series called Mile Marker 181 about a local car accident. And it becomes this play of who's really being investigated, as well as the rights and wrongs on how much you cover and how much you make from these types of series.
Well, thank you, because I know some of that stuff. That's like the questions I have to ask, you know what I mean? Like, I have to play devil's advocate, but I totally respect you not wanting to answer them.
I understand, but I thought you knew me better than that.
What? I'm not even, hey, I have to dig and see what I can get. You know what I mean? Can you blame me?
I'm sorry, but
No,
I'm pissed at you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The next one is what I consider the best version of what a lot of video essays are trying to be, but this is a full-out personal doc, and it's Milisuthando. Set in past, present, and future South Africa, the filmmaker looks back at her upbringing and how much her memories altered how she's viewed the world, especially considering that she grew up during apartheid and doesn't know what apartheid was. This finds really poetic ways to look back at her childhood while also having the audacity to just cut to black for some big revelations between her and her friends, and just the creativity behind it deserves a spot on my list.
My name is Milisuthando Bongela. My morning ritual usually involves me mourning the night, trying so hard to remember my dreams. In fact, over the last 8 years, this film was very much negotiated in dreams, with ancestors both old and coming.
The following doc looks back at the 200 years of the video camera, titling itself after a phrase by a king who owned one of the first, Fantastic Machine. It's produced by Ruben Östlund, so you know it's going to have a strong sense of humor as it archives one of the youngest mediums we've had as humans, motion pictures. It gets into viral videos, culture, news, why we document what we document, and what are the consequences when we're capturing everything all the time.
The very first time a human being was captured on camera was actually a coincidence in 1839. Exposure took about 10 minutes back then, meaning everything moving around would disappear from the image. But one man getting his shoes shined was staying still exactly during those minutes, and then became the first living soul to be captured in a photographic image.
At number 7, I have the Tribeca film about a film called Chasing Amy. It's a mix of looking at Kevin Smith's movie and the legacy that's left behind and all of its problems, but it really surprised me on how it weaves in the director's story and their relationship, because it doesn't end up being a love letter to Smith, but even more so a love letter to their significant other.
The movie is amazing, but whatever moved you, there's a dark side too.
Keeping in line with documenting and documentaries, there's one that caught me by surprise, The Ark of Oblivion. It's produced by the one and only Werner Herzog, and it follows the world of archiving and memory, with the director looking to build an ark in Maine that's meant to be the ultimate record keeper, only to then slickly turn this movie into that. It's loaded with a bunch of expert talking heads and ideas, different forms of how you can actually store information that I thought was pretty insane, and it's one that I'd keep on your radar if any of that piques your interest.
You can go anywhere on Earth and find archives, but here's the thing. By exploring the archive, we change it.
At number 5, I have Going to Mars, the Nikki Giovanni project. She's just cool, man. Like, I knew very little about her going into this, so I can't say if it fully embodies her life story, but it fully embodied how much of a badass she is. It does a cool job at presenting her poetry through personal archives, B-roll, and neat visual techniques to bring her words to life, and it's full of quotes that have stuck with me ever since I watched it at the beginning of the year.
We're going to Mars. We're going to Mars because whatever is wrong with us will not get right with us. So we journey forth, carrying the same baggage, but every now and then leaving one little bitty thing behind.
Number 4 is a documentary from D. Smith, who I remember from the Lil Wayne song Shoot Me Down, and it's Kokomo City. It follows 4 sex workers who disclose pretty much everything, from their lifestyles, their treatment, to the secret world of powerful and rich people who keep all of this behind closed doors. And it's constantly bringing up this question on who society thinks looks like the solution and who's supposed to look like the problem. I think it's one of the best talking head docs where it's just people telling their stories, and sadly one of those that took one of them just months after the premiere. So they were definitely speaking about a lot.
You know, are you really at peace with yourself, knowing that
the best of you is only seen when you're a survivalist.
To my top 3, we have Angel Applicant, the story of a man diagnosed with systemic scleroderma as he's documenting the artwork of Paul Klee, an artist who himself also had the same disease. It gets into how the artist was able to incorporate his journey with his condition and his pain and everything he went through into his artwork, the same way the filmmaker is then able to do through his film. And it was outstanding.
You probably won't ask about it, but your eyes will.
And number 2 is the most brutal documentary that had us taking an entire afternoon off right after watching it. Look, no festival has been short on movies covering war and escaping terrible places.
This is painful to watch, but it must be painful to watch.
Because Sundance had several, like Iron Butterflies, that came from a documentarian whose previous movie was made out of found footage shot by ex-soldiers. And here he was covering MH17's takedown in an experimental way that gets into CGing out the news and how propaganda is really just a country's form of PR, and how World War III has become contract work, where it's all done for money. 5 Seasons of Revolution was another that comes from producer Laura Poitras, and is the feature debut from Lena, who used secret personas in order to film in different places with a network of other people who also had secret identities working together just to pass along footage. They even used face swap technology like Welcome to Chechnya in order to put together this undercover film that was 10 years in the making. But it's 20 Days in Mariupol that stood out the most and holds my number 2 spot. The director here is the one who shot all the Ukraine footage that you've been seeing all around the news and even in other Ukrainian docs, and this is him documenting everything firsthand from when he was on the ground, and everything he sees is harrowing.
My brain will desperately want to forget all this, but the camera will not let it happen.
And number 1 is Luke Lorenzen's A Still Small Voice. Previously, he made the movie Midnight Family that follows medical emergencies in Mexico and mainly focuses on the Ochoa family who would compete with other ambulances in order to make money if they ever even got paid. And Apple TV Plus is adapting that into a drama series, so I'm looking forward to that. Here, he stays on the medical side of things and follows a hospital chaplain who's like ASA in ambulance, because this is a person who can't imagine separating her emotions because she's so dedicated to helping people that it clashes with what the hospital deems as success, even if it may not be successful for the patient. I think Lorenzen is one of the best documentarians we have right now, just off of the craft alone, because he knows how to be a fly in the wall and let moments speak for themselves without ever interfering, and showing how places would rather explain than explore. What happens when curiosity gets replaced with rules. And honestly, it was just great to document someone in this world who seems to give up. Finally, there's the dramas. And with both Sundance and South by having their first Oscar Best Picture winners premiering at their fest, they did not play when it came to their lineups. There were grandpas pulling real-life GTAs, Rich Brian making a music video feature film, and Piaf about a Foley artist who slowly becomes a horse girl, causing her to go from crying in the club to galloping. There was also a lot of stand-up performances, such as one of my favorite actors right now, Franz, who was in Passages and is always giving it his all, even if it is him playing the worst person in multiple relationships. Plus, Ben Whishaw is in it, and he did a great job literally putting his whole back into it. There was also David Strathairn in A Little Prayer, who's the main grandpa holding his family together until his son has an affair that he feels he's to blame for. The Great Silence, that stars Christine Thorpe, who's killed it in Ninja Baby from South by a couple years ago, and was also in Sick of Myself from Cannes. And here she plays a 29-year-old who joins a convent to become a nun before her brother pulls up and starts calling out all her secrets. And wrapping up the honorables would be a movie executive produced by Kate Blanchett titled Shatter, that stars Zara Mir Ebrahimi as an Iranian mother who's escaping her ex-husband with her 6-year-old before he finds them again. And this woman just continues to deliver every time she's on screen. But starting off my list at number 10, I have the experimental drama Bravo Burkina. It follows a young guy who leaves his village to go to Italy, only to return back home by traveling through time, visions, and memories. It comes from Wale Oyajide, who's an artist through and through because his works have ended up in museums, he's made designs for massive blockbusters, and he even calls this movie a migration time travel love story, and that speaks on the world being the place that teaches you suffering, whereas your family is who teaches you love.
Quanto lontano dobbiamo spingerci? Quante maschere dobbiamo indossare prima di vederci per quello che siamo?
And number 9 is one from the Chicago International Film Festival called Mediterranean Fever, which was pitched to us as The Sopranos in the Middle East. We meet Waleed, who's looking to become a screenwriter, but he's dealing with a lot of depression until he meets his new neighbor, whose criminal background leads to him cooking up a scheme. It's darkly funny and written to a T for all the actors.
شو ولا هي كمان مش حاسة إنها عم بتساعدك؟
بدك أكون صريح وبدون زعل؟
طبعا.
حاسس إنه عم بضيع وقتك ووقتي ومصريات مرتي.
And number 8 is a Sundance movie that comes from a director from Hyde Park called La Pecera, a drama about a Puerto Rican woman whose cancer has spread due to the military contaminating her hometown that she grew up in, and it has a great lead performance from Michelle Rodriguez, and the script is shot beautifully to showcase the metaphor of her body being the island, the tumor being the parasite that continues to leech off her resources.
¡Afuera, coño! ¡Afuera, vamos!
Number 7 is a standout from South by Southwest that pretty much takes place in one location for the most part, titled Upon Entry. Diego and Elena have just moved to the United States, ready to start anew, but upon entry, end up at the secondary inspection that not only questions why they're there, but who they are, what they are to each other, as secrets they've never said start to be revealed.
El abogado dijo que podrían hacerme más preguntas, pero esto no, coño.
Sí, me habían revisado así en mi vida. Mi vida. Igual es por lo de tu pasaporte perdido.
Robado.
Bueno.
No, pero eso en teoría estaba solucionado.
Number 6 is probably the best looking movie mentioned in this whole video, All Dirt Roads Taste of Salt, a poetic look at a Mississippi woman's life through decades, including the generations that have come before her and will come after. And I know that a lot of movies like to market themselves as a new Malick, but this embodies that vibe and makes it its own. It's impeccably shot in 35mm to capture what really is a sequence of moments, like a series of portraits where you get to press the live button and be in that scene, and the way it repeats certain sounds to connect different periods of time and how it shapes the characters. Oh, it's a work of art. It's directed by Raven Jackson, produced by Barry Jenkins, and I wish there was a clip that I can play, but A24 should have this one out by the end of the year. At this midway point, I have the indiest of indies written, directed, produced, edited, and composed by Dylan Tucker called Pure O. It sees a musician managing his form of OCD based on the director's own story. And I know that therapy and how people approach it are always going to vary from person to person, but I thought the way they handled and talked about anxiety was insightful and had pretty good music as well, also done by the director.
No, she thinks I have OCD.
OCD? Really?
That's what I said.
Sorry, I don't understand. You don't have any of those tics or rituals or anything, do you?
No, I don't know. I don't know either.
And number 4 is a drama from Aristotle Torres, who's worked with Nas, Cole, and a bunch of festivals, named Story F, about a teenager who holds up a train worker in order to get that gentrification tax, only to have that robbery change their lives for the better and for worse. It's produced by Jamie Foxx and Luis Guzman, who also stars in it and does a really great job, alongside Asante Black and Melvin Gregg, and it gets into the idea of art imitating life and reminding you that if you don't take care of your neighborhood, then who will?
I didn't want to tell a Latin story. I didn't want to tell a black story. I didn't want to tell a cool story. I wanted to tell an emotional story.
And number 3 is a Sundance relationship drama, Slow, about a dancer and a sign language interpreter who meet and bond until they have to deal with one big difference between them. Now, I haven't seen too many movies that talk about these types of relationships, but the two leads make it feel so raw with their performances, and how they handle their intimate moments easily made it one that was a standout out of all the fests. Number 2 is a film about an aspiring bodybuilder named Magazine Dreams. And boy, does the plot hit different now. It's about a guy who's trying to be #1 so bad in hopes of being on magazines, only to maybe end up on those magazines for the wrong reasons. It's produced by Dan Gilroy, who did Nightcrawler, and nails that similar approach to a character study and violence, and how obviously now that has a different connotation. Searchlight had so much faith in this movie that it set up an awards campaign before the last Oscars were even live streamed, and now the movie's story is starting to get blurred, so we'll see how it rolls out.
People hurt you, but the art never hurts. It can break you, but it's there to heal you. You know what I mean? It's a very unsafe place. You go into your art form, when you get in your bag, as it were. It's dangerous.
Finally, at number 1 is the comedy drama I Used to Be Funny, starring Rachel Sennett as a stand-up comedian who's taken a pause after a major incident that leads to the disappearance of a girl she used to nanny for. I think director Ali Pankew does a great job mixing the genres and not losing the funny moments amidst all the drama, because I know that a lot of people don't take comedies that seriously, like they don't think they're the awards contenders. I think a lot of people would categorize one of these right here as a drama and the other as a comedy, even though I think they both strike the same balance of which makes you laugh the most. Just, one gets the more prestige answer. But Rachel proves here that the funniest actors can also deliver the most emotional performances. Thank you all for watching this video, and a big thank you to all the channel members and patrons again for supporting and for getting a lot of this stuff early. I know that it was a big one and a long one, and I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface because a lot of the movies from these fests have come out, so they're going to be in the midway year. So obviously there's a bunch more lists to look forward to, and this is also a list, so I want to talk about these in more depth because I could also make a side video for all of the shorts because we haven't scratched the surface. Like, there's so many. I'll have to make a letterbox list compiling all of these together because shorts tend to have the worst releases, until they get adapted into a full feature film, but there's a lot of great ones there as well. On top of that, some festivals are dropping film from the title, like Tribeca did, in order to add gaming, podcast, TV, and even VR experiences, or how Austin calls it, XR experiences. So, we're going to expand to a lot of other things because in Austin, we were able to see some pretty cool tech where it's more than just the VR headsets that you can have at home. Like, they put you in suits. They're building out the environment, so get ready, Player One. Other than that, let me know your thoughts down below on your picks. I know that a lot of the time we'll catch 101 movies, but still get called out for not catching 102. But if anything's missing from here, again, if it's been released, we'll be covering it hopefully in our mid-year list. If not, we watch so much. The only thing that really stops us from seeing a movie is if the studio doesn't let us. So I'm curious to know what you'd add to my watch list, what your future favorites are. And until next time, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and one day we'll have our own LME festival.